Hello and welcome to this lecture on Neanderthal archaeobotany. My name is Langejans and I work at the TU Delft. I'm an archaeologist. Now in this lecture I will first discuss some of the basics regarding archaeobotany, and then I will talk about Neanderthals and the plants they used in the past, and then we'll get to my own research, Neanderthal adhesives. This is a component of my current research project on prehistoric adhesives. So archaeology, that is the study of the human past. And as you can see in this spiral of time, that past is actually quite recent when you take a geological perspective. How recent? Well, let's say the last 3 million years. 3 million years ago, that is more or less the moment that our ancestors, hominin ancestors, started to leave a material culture behind in the form of stone tools. So today is not going to be about plants during the Jurassic, and I will not directly talk about dinosaurs. So archaeobotany is the study of plants in the past, but it's the human-plant interaction that archaeobotanists are interested in. There needs to be an anthropogenic component in order for it to be archaeobotany. On this page you will find 2 links to YouTube videos. Choose one and have a look. Here, people who are more knowledgeable about archaeobotany than I am will give you the ins and outs and will give you an idea of the methods that we use. So what can plants tell us? What did people use plants for in the past? Well, the obvious one is that people, of course, ate plants. So when you find them at your archaeological site and you are able to reconstruct what these plants are, the species, you can say something about the diet of these people. But not all plants are wild, and you can see that on this reconstruction, on this image. So looking at plants also gives you information about their way of living. Are we dealing with hunter-gatherers? Are these people farmers? People also used plants to make objects, tools, and in constructions. And this gives us information about their material culture, but also their cultural traditions. And of course, you can study how things were made, and then that gives you insight into technology. That's my pet project. When you have a lot of information, and when you understand the scale of how plants were collected, how they were processed, how much people relied on these plants, then you can say something about their economy, and maybe even about their social structures. So very general, plants help us to understand how people lived. But they also help us to reconstruct the environment and climate. Plants are habitat specific, and some are very sensitive, and it's these types of plants that help us to reconstruct ancient environments. Plants, like all other organic matter, contains carbon-14. It preserves very well in plant material, and carbon-14 is used in carbon-14 dating or radiometric dating. Google it if you want to know more. And tree ring analysis is another method, dating method, a very precise method. Direct dating is very important, obviously, to archaeologists. It provides context. The problem with plants is that they do not preserve very well, not as well as stones, bones, or metal. So when we want to study plants, very often the material comes from situations, as you see here on this slide, where material was partially burned or carbonized, from very cold environments, or from environments where the material was deprived from oxygen, like in a waterlogged environment. There is another strategy that, besides looking for sites in these maybe extreme environments, and that is to focus on parts of the plant that are naturally strong. And those are mainly the pollen and phytoliths. Pollen being the male reproductive cells, and phytoliths being silica skeletons, particles that are present in plants as well. So an archaeobotanist relies on very similar methods as you. Basically a comparison with a modern reference collection. But we also use experimentation, for example to understand the decay of plants and how food was prepared in the past. And we use analogies with ethnographic data, and obviously this is where you guys come in. The plant parts that we study are also different. Archaeobotanists make the distinction of studying macro remains and micro remains. And macro remains you study with a stereo microscope, and this includes wood, fibers, imprints, fruits, seeds, charcoal. But there are also micro remains, and for this you need a high power microscope with magnification starting from 50 times. And these are phytoliths, starch, pollen, and although technically not allowed, I suppose, because they're not really plants, diatoms or algae as well. Now, the great thing is that all these things that you see here, all these categories, if they are preserved well, they can be identified to species level. Another method in analysis, or another way of looking at prehistoric plants, is through isotope analysis. And with isotope analysis, we look for the plant component in the diet. So you actually get the information from the animal or the human, the consumer of the plants, and it gives you insight into the amount of C4 and C3 plants that they ate when they were alive. Now Google this C3, C4 plants if you're interested. There's not enough time to discuss it today. Another way in is chemical characterization. When you have a residue of something amorphous that you cannot morphologically identify, you can use gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, or something that's called proteomics. And this allows you to identify waxes, lipids, and aromatics. And some of these can be species or genus specific. And of course, there is ancient DNA analysis. So let's talk Neanderthals. Neanderthals are a hominin species that lived from 300,000 years ago to 30,000 years ago in Europe, Eurasia, and it's important to realize that they are not our ancestors. Rather, we share a common ancestor. Now, as you can see from this image, Neanderthals were very similar to us, but they were more robust, if you like. Robust bones and teeth, and they have this, what we call a barrel-shaped chest. Their limbs, and particularly their legs, in proportion to the rest of their body, are somewhat shorter. Now, a major endeavor in prehistoric research is the comparison of Neanderthals with modern humans. And modern humans, that's people like you and me. Did Neanderthals think and behave like us? Were they cognitively as advanced? And that of course brings us to the question, how can we identify complex behavior, even for modern humans in the past? How can we identify cognition or technology? Now, I'm not going to go into detail here, but in the coming slides I will point out to you that specific archaeological finds contribute to this incredibly current and important debate in prehistoric archaeology. For a long time, archaeologists did not consider plants when it came to Neanderthal diet, and in doing so, also their material culture. Fauna remains from excavations showed that Neanderthals were very successful hunters, and isotope analysis on their bones proved that meat was the major component in their diet. So much so that most archaeologists consider Neanderthals to be top carnivores. They are on the same level as a saber-toothed cat, for example. Now, because there were no dietary indications, Neanderthals were basically sentenced to a completely plantless life. And in reconstructions, they only seem to wear animal skins. They have containers made from animal materials like bladders. Huts were made from animal bones and hides. This image of a Neanderthal as a total carnivore is slowly changing, and you see that reflected in the image on the right here. And today I want to share with you a few major and very recent finds that contribute to this change. And sort of mark my words, but in a few years this lady on the right hand side will hold a bark container with a fiber rope, and this girl will have a piece of bread in her hand. Now, while we go over these major archaeological finds, we're going to take sort of a macro-micro perspective. So I'm going to start with objects and we're going to end with molecules. So let's start with the objects that are made from plants. Well, very superficially, this only comes in one flavor for Neanderthals so far: sticks, or long pieces of wood. And here on the left you see a digging stick, and on the right, the top right, you see a spear. And then of course there's one of those nice reconstructions again. Both were found at Schöningen, which is a very rich site in Germany, and it is a waterlogged site, and that explains why we have these beautiful wooden objects preserved. Currently there are 9 spears, 1 lance, a double-pointed stick, a burnt stick, and a digging stick. And this site and this material dates back to 300,000 years ago. Now, Schöningen in Germany is not the only site from where we know these wooden objects. We have them from the UK, but also from Spain and Italy. They are similar in the sense that they are all long sticks. Now, how do you make a tool like this? Well, it involves branch shaping, bark peeling, twig removal, shaping, polishing, and then thermal exposition and chopping. And it is this thermal exposure to fire, the fire hardening of the tip, that gives this tool a hint of complexity, meaning that Neanderthals did not simply take a branch and made a pointed stick, but they actively changed the mechanical properties of the wood. Now, interesting is that except for the Schöningen spears, all of these finds are made on boxwood and yew. And these woods are hard, they are very flexible, but rot resistant. And traditionally we know from more recent times that they're excellent to make spears and bows. Now, the discovery of the digging stick is extra interesting because from ethnographic accounts, digging sticks are often used to dig up bulbs and tubers. So digging sticks may point to even more plant use by Neanderthals in the past. Now follow this link that you see here to a YouTube clip on how to make a spear thrower. The process for making a spear thrower is very similar, or the process that you see here is very similar, but keep in mind that there is no evidence at all that Neanderthals used spear throwers. Rather, they used handheld spears. Now, another line of evidence comes from a site called Abric Romani in Spain, and here over 100 wooden imprints were found. One of the most tantalizing ones you see here on your right is located in a hearth. Here one imprint overlaps with the other, and this could be the first ever kitchen discovered. So we're going to stick with wood for a little while longer, because we also find abundant charcoal remains. I wouldn't say the deep past, but some, let's say 20 or 30 years ago, it was questioned if Neanderthals could make fire. We now know that they definitely used fire and probably also made it themselves. And as I said before, charcoal can be identified to species level. This has everything to do with the way the cells are organized in the tissue. And I am reconstructing these species. We know that Neanderthals generally collected wood in the vicinity from where they burnt it. So what we find at the site is similar to what was around naturally. However, at the excavations of El Salt in Spain, archaeobotanists found that Neanderthals purposefully selected degraded wood. And degraded wood is wood that is damaged by fungi or microorganisms. And I can tell you from experience that rotting wood does not make good fuel. The temperatures never get very high, and it smokes like hell. And this seems to be intentional. And we can only wonder about the reasons. Something medicinal? Something to repel insects, maybe? Now again, it is this type of complex behavior that archaeologists contribute to modern cognition. So this find is very interesting when we consider Neanderthal and complex behavior. Now we're going to zoom in a little bit in terms of the scale of the plant remains. At the excavation of Abri du Maras in France, there is evidence of fiber technology, and this comes in the form of a tiny residue, a 3-ply cord fragment made from inner bark fibers. These minuscule remains were found on a stone tool that you see here on the right hand side here. And the twisted fibers, twisted fibers in general, they provide a basis for clothing, rope, bags, nets, mats, and even boats. So for modern humans, fiber technology is an indispensable part of daily life, and this is the first evidence we have that Neanderthals also had a fiber technology. And now here it comes, because understanding and using twisted fibers implies the use of what we call complex multi-component technology, as well as a mathematical understanding of pairs, sets, and numbers. And it is this mathematical component to fiber technology that makes it an incredibly strong and new argument when we consider Neanderthal cognition. Now, if you're interested on how cord is made from bark fibers, then follow this link on this page again to a YouTube clip. It's the same guy that you saw previously, but now he makes fiber, but I think he also makes a mat, very bushcraft style. So let's look even closer to Neanderthals, and let's look at dental calculus. Dental calculus is plaque, the kind of stuff that dentists remove from your teeth. And in dental calculus, microfossils get trapped. And you can study the dental calculus of animals, but also of humans and Neanderthals. And in this case, the researchers found indeed starch grains and phytoliths trapped in dental calculus of Neanderthals. And as a result, we now know that Neanderthals consumed date palms, legumes, and grass seeds. Many of the grass seed starches showed damage that is very distinctive for cooking. Now, from other finds in dental calculus, we know that Neanderthals may also have used yarrow and chamomile. These are very bitter tasting medicinal plants. Now, this research is interesting for two reasons. First, plants were part of the Neanderthal diet, despite the isotope data that says they only ate meat. And two, Neanderthals cooked. And cooking is a transformative technology, relying on expert knowledge also when it comes to fire management. Again, plants make a major contribution to this cognitive debate that keeps popping up. Okay, so lastly, let's look at plant remains that are so small that they are only chemical signals. We can find these chemical signals in sediment, but also in prehistoric poo, coprolites. And here you see an example of a dinosaur, a dinosaur turd or coprolite, and there is a foot bone of its prey inside. So coprolites tell us what was eaten. At El Salt, again, this amazing site in Spain, small coprolites were found in the sediments, and they were analyzed with gas chromatography. And they found chemical signals that were, yes, also the byproduct of meat consumption and meat digestion, cholesterol mainly, but this chemical signal also included a significant portion of plant sterols. Now, of course, when you think back to the dental calculus and the microfossils trapped in the dental calculus, we could argue, was it really eaten? Were these plants really eaten? Are plants part of the Neanderthal diet, yes or no? Okay, we could have this conversation. When it comes to the poo, it becomes more difficult. There's now unambiguously information that Neanderthals ate and digested plants. So, in conclusion, we can say it's a myth that Neanderthals did not eat or use plants. Moreover, they were probably an important part of their lives, and they are most certainly an important part or an important contribution to this ongoing debate on prehistoric behavior and the complexity of prehistoric behavior. Now, and this is also what my own research is about. It is about technology, the complexity of prehistoric technology, and specifically glue technology. And of course, glue, not always, but at times, is made from plants. Now, we know that Neanderthals made and used glues. Moreover, the oldest adhesive in the world was even made by a Neanderthal and not a modern human. It was found in Italy, and it's that site here in blue, Campitello Quarry. It dates back to over 190 years. It consists of birch bark tar. And Neanderthals used at least 3 types of adhesives: conifer resin, tar, and bitumen. Now, bitumen is, for obvious reasons, beyond the scope of this lecture. Okay, so glues are used to bond 2 surfaces together. And in prehistory, we generally see the bonding of a tool with a handle. And that's what you see here. Here is a tool, here's the here is the tool, and here is the handle, here is some binding, and here is a very sloppy adhesive. This is an ethnographic example from southern Africa, made by a San or Bushman person, and the brown-black stuff that you see here is an adhesive, and it's connecting this point to its bone haft. There are other purposes, repair and waterproofing among them. Now, we know that ancient people manipulated the material properties of these adhesives. For example, they added fat or beeswax as a plasticizer when the resins were very dry and brittle. We also know that they added ochre to exudates. My team and I conducted mechanical tests used in modern industry today, and we were able to show that adding ochre has a clear functional benefit. It increases strength. And the same, adding beeswax, it has a functional benefit. So plants excrete resins and other exudates like rubber and gum as a means of defense and protection. They simply drip from a wound and they can be collected. And of course you can also purposefully harm a tree, so the yield increases. For this we don't have real evidence in deep prehistory, but later on we do, particularly for mastic, that is a very specific resin from a pistache species, and Boswellia frankincense. That is because they start appearing in the archaeological record in really high quantities, and it's unlikely that they were just collected from the wild. And when that starts happening, we can also consider that harvesting these resins was a seasonal activity. Now, for hunter-gatherers and Neanderthals, I don't think we can say things like this. We have no, they probably had no need for such large quantities of resin. There are a number of Neanderthal tools with residues like the one that you see here. So here you see these residues attached to the stone surface, and these residues were tested with gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, and they were found to be pine resins. They may have been mixed with beeswax, but this evidence is very speculative. These adhesives were used to halve the stone tools, and we know that from the location on the tools. The sharp working edges are free, and it's the blunt sides suited to hold the haft that show traces of resin. So moving on to tar. Currently there are 3 sites with 5 objects that contain tar. As I said, the oldest is over 190 years old. That's this one here, but also this one. The other ones all date back to about 50,000 years ago. And it's these black residues here and here, here and here that were analyzed with gas chromatography and mass spectrometry. And in all cases, it was confirmed that this is tar made from birch bark. And in all cases, the tar was used to create a handle on the tool. And the tar remains are actually quite large. All the tools are very simple. That means that when they were struck from the stone, they were not shaped into a formal tool, like a point. So we call this simple flakes. Now the example here on the right is my favorite, and I am slightly bragging a bit here, but I was part of the research team that described this object. It was found at the Zandmotor Beach. That's close to The Hague here in the Netherlands. And the tar was directly dated with the carbon-14 method, and it was shown that the tar is 48,000 years old. Now at this beach we have many surface finds from this time period. Now tar gives us insight into the technological capabilities of Neanderthals. And as I just said, my interest is in technology and its complexity. Now first, tar making is a bit like kitchen chemistry. It is impossible to predict that when you have bark, tar is going to be the end product. The materials are very different. And to make tar, you need to heat the bark between 300 and 600 degrees, and you have to make sure no oxygen gets into the reaction chamber. This way, the tar does not burn. Next, you catch the tar dripping from the bark. And to illustrate this, I want to show you a small clip from a TV program, De Kennis van Nu. And in the clip, I will place a glass bottle with bark in a fire and tar will form. Now look closely as the tar condensates against the glass.
Het teer dat de Neandertalers als lijm gebruikten, wordt met hitte gedampt uit berkenschors. Alleen, de Neandertalers hadden geen potjes.
Okay, lovely tar. Now, another reason why tar is interesting to archaeologists is basically its practical production process. This process is considered to be highly complex, but nobody had actually been successful in recreating this process without the convenient use of a glass bottle, or in the case of Neanderthals, pottery. So my team and I experimented for weeks on end, and we found 3 ways to make tar. And very recently a team from Germany published another super simple way to make tar, and that you see here under the condensation technique. That's basically a bark roll that they set to fire, and then they catch the fumes and the vapors with a stone and they scrape off the tar. Now here on this page you see that the methods that we know of, they range from very simple to complex. So condensation is what we consider the most simple method, and the oven structure with a buried container, a dome made from earth or clay, and then a fire that's lit around it is the most complex way to make tar. The link in this slide, if you want to know more about it, will take you to the full clip from the TV program De Kennis van Nu. And here my team and I demonstrate some of these other methods that are not illustrated now here on this page. It is in Dutch, but I think the images speak for themselves. Okay, so after we successfully recreated these production methods, we analyzed the yield and the investment per method. And we found that the most complex method to make tar, the oven structure, also produced the most tar per 100 grams bark. So don't worry too much about reading everything in detail. Concentrate on, let's say, the extremes for now. And you see that the difference is major here. Also, the oven method turned out to be much more cost effective in terms of firewood, bark, and time. Again, don't worry too much, but what we did here is we wanted to calculate how many resources do you need to make as much tar that is used to halve the zandmotor find. And that's this amount. To do that, the oven method is much more efficient. So, which method did Neanderthals then use in the end? To do that, we studied the contamination pattern of the particles in the tar with a CT scanner. And this showed that very fine sand and pieces of charcoal were spread throughout the tar very homogeneously. And this, and from our experiments, we know that this only happens when the tar is completely liquid and when it drips into the container or the catchment. With the other methods, we only see this with the oven method, and we don't see this with the other experimental methods. We don't find this pattern of contamination. So, again, consider that all the archaeological tar finds are quite large. They contain a lot of tar. And the tar is used on simple domestic tools. And this tells us that Neanderthals were very good at making large quantities of tar, and that the use of tar was also an integrated part of their general tool-making practices. Here you see a reconstruction of the mammoth steppe that was present in northern Europe during the ice ages. This was a very cold and hostile environment with only grasses and mosses. You can see large herbivores roaming this steppe-like environment. Now, at the time that the zandmotor tar was made, the Netherlands was largely this treeless mammoth steppe. And you could say that there was material scarcity. If you want to make tar, there's hardly any wood, let alone birch bark available. And therefore efficiency must have been important to Neanderthals. Now, indirectly and directly, my team and I showed that Neanderthals had a complex plant technology. And this clearly contributes to ongoing debates on the cognitive comparisons with modern humans. But we can do more. By proving that Neanderthals used a complex technology, we can also say something about group size and mobility. Researchers say that Neanderthals were not capable to retain complex knowledge, for example to make tar, to retain it in their groups, because to do this you would need large groups, many people that together remember knowledge and keep it alive. Also, researchers say that complex technology or knowledge in general is better retained when groups are less mobile. However, we know that northern Neanderthals in the last ice age lived in very small and highly mobile groups. And yet, we find this tar technology that is now demonstrated to be complex. So, tar and tar technology can provide a clue that current ideas about mobility and group size are incorrect. Now, we are approaching the end. This is the last slide, and in this lecture on Neanderthal archaeobotany, I showed you that when plants are preserved, they have a lot of saying power. They help us to reconstruct Neanderthal diets, shifting the paradigm away from this idea of total carnivores. Neanderthals also mastered a very complex plant-based technology, tar production, a technology similar to other transformative technologies modern humans developed, like pottery and metallurgy. They retained this knowledge even when they lived in small and mobile groups. Now, a lot of archaeological work relies on data from other fields, and this includes ethnobotany. Next semester, I hope that my team and I are able to visit Zambia and Ethiopia and to meet traditional glue makers, because they can give us the more ephemeral details as to why they select and use specific plants and glues. And this is the kind of data we will never be able to excavate. Well, that's it from my side. Keep well